The vending machine stared at Alan Faulkner with silent defiance, as though it had taken a solemn vow never to relinquish his Snickers bar. Alan, a man who had long ago accepted that the universe seemed to have a personal vendetta against him, jabbed the button again. "Come on, you overpriced hunk of junk. Do you really need to win this round too?" The machine whirred faintly, a sound that could have been its attempt at mocking laughter. Alan sighed, gave it a half-hearted kick, and leaned his head against the glass. The rain outside hammered against the shop's thin metal roof in an unrelenting rhythm, the storm having rolled in just as Alan's shift ended. It was late. His dinner plans were now a casualty of the storm, and his one consolation, a candy bar, was being held hostage. Life, he thought, had a cruel sense of humor. That was when he saw her. At first, Alan thought the strange woman standing just outside the circle of light from the street lamp might be a trick of his tired mind. She was tall, strikingly tall, her form wrapped in a shimmering material that seemed to absorb and reflect the street lamp's glow. Her hair flowed like dark liquid, moving subtly even in the absence of wind, and her eyes, impossibly large, impossibly luminous, seemed to pierce through the rain, the vending machine, and Alan himself. He froze, hand still on the button. Hi?" he ventured, his voice tinged with the awkward uncertainty of someone who wasn't sure if they were seeing a person or a ghost. Or maybe something worse. The woman tilted her head, as though his greeting were a complex riddle. Then she stepped forward, the rain parting around her like she carried her own invisible umbrella. "You're difficult to keep alive, Alan Faulkner," she said, her tone matter-of-fact, as though she'd just remarked on the weather. "Though I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. You've always been, well, how do humans put it, recklessly charming." Alan blinked. What?" The woman sighed, the sound carrying a note of long-suffering patience. "You don't recognize me, do you? Of course not. Why would you? Linear memory is such a frustratingly fragile construct." She seemed to be talking more to herself than to him now. "Well, no matter. What's important is that I've saved your life countless times, and you're about to get yourself killed again." Alan stared at her, uncomprehending. "Look, lady, I don't know who you are or what kind of weird space cult you're selling, but—" "Space cult?" She looked genuinely offended. "Do I look like I belong to a space cult?" Alan's gaze flicked to the shimmering outfit, the glowing eyes, and the fact that her boots didn't appear to be touching the wet pavement. "I mean, you've got a vibe." The woman pinched the bridge of her nose in an expression so universal that Alan almost laughed. Almost. "Listen to me carefully, Alan. I am Thera. I have been protecting you, guiding you, across more lifetimes than you could possibly comprehend. And right now, your survival is once again hanging by a thread because you're too stubborn to walk away from things like malfunctioning vending machines." Alan's laugh broke free, sharp and incredulous. "Okay, Thara, sure, and I'm the Emperor of Mars. What exactly do you think is going to kill me? A candy bar to the skull?" Thara raised an eyebrow, her expression one of weary exasperation. "That machine," she said, pointing with a graceful hand at the offending vending contraption, "is malfunctioning because a surge from the electrical grid will overload its circuits in approximately 17 seconds. That overload will create a spark, igniting a gas leak that you haven't noticed because your human olfactory senses are appallingly dull. If you remain here, you'll be unconscious before you have the chance to wonder why everything smells like sulfur." Alan opened his mouth to respond but stopped short. Now that she mentioned it, there was an odd chemical tang in the air, a faint, acrid scent that made the back of his throat itch. "Wait," he said, holding up a hand. "Are you telling me this thing's about to explode?" He glanced at the vending machine as though it might sprout legs and run for cover. "How? Why?" Thera didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed his wrist, her touch cool and oddly soothing, and tugged him toward the door. "Explanations can wait. Move." Alan stumbled after her, still half convinced that this was some elaborate prank orchestrated by his coworkers. He just reached the edge of the parking lot when a sudden flash of light lit up the shop behind them, followed by a deep, resonant boom. The vending machine, and the wall behind it, disappeared in a cloud of sparks and fire. For a moment, Alan and Thara stood in silence, the rain hissing against the smoldering wreckage. "Okay," Alan said finally, his voice faint. "You've got my attention." Thara turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Good. That will make this next part much easier." Alan gave her a wary look. "Next part?" Before she could answer, a deep resonant hum filled the air, accompanied by a faint vibration that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Alan's eyes darted skyward, where a faint, pulsating light had begun to form in the rain-heavy clouds. What is that?" he asked, his voice catching on the last word. Thara didn't respond immediately. Instead, she tilted her head, her luminous eyes narrowing as though calculating some unseen variable. "That," she said after a pause, "is why I'm here. And if you thought the vending machine was bad, you're not going to like this part." Alan stared at her, his mind struggling to process the sheer absurdity of the situation. "You've got to be kidding me." Thara almost smiled. "Oh, Alan, if only your life were ever that simple." Alan Faulkner had always prided himself on being a man of reason, which was ironic, considering he once tried to weld a wrench back together just to avoid buying a new one. But as he stared at the glowing clouds above and the smoldering ruins of his shop behind, reason seemed like a distant memory. Standing beside him was Thara, the self-proclaimed alien protector, who looked utterly unfazed by the fact that the sky had decided to host a light show that seemed one wrong move away from unleashing the apocalypse. Alan cleared his throat. "So, is now the part where you tell me I'm on some hidden camera show? Or should I be bracing for a welcome to the resistance speech?" Thara turned to him with an expression that straddled the line between pity and mild amusement. "Alan, your grasp of cosmic events is as endearing as it is painfully limited." "Yeah, well, my grasp of cosmic events usually involves late-night sci-fi marathons, not vending machines exploding and whatever that is." He gestured vaguely toward the pulsating light in the clouds. "So maybe cut me some slack." Thara sighed, the kind of sigh that hinted at centuries of exasperation. "That," she said, pointing skyward, "is a rift. A tear in the fabric of space-time caused by destabilizing energy from the Krez-Thari." Alan blinked. "The Krez who now?" "The Krez-Thari," she repeated, as though explaining to a particularly slow student. "An interdimensional faction that thrives on chaos. They manipulate timelines, disrupt key events, and, on occasion, eliminate individuals who serve as temporal anchors." Alan stared at her blankly. "You know, most people just settle for robbing banks." Thara ignored him. "You, Alan, are one such anchor. Your existence, mundane as it may seem, keeps this timeline stable. Without you, the chain of causality collapses, opening the door for the Krez-Thari to reshape this reality into something far less hospitable." Alan rubbed his temples. "Okay, let me get this straight. I'm some kind of cosmic linchpin, and there's a bunch of interdimensional jerks trying to take me out so they can, what? Turn the Earth into their personal sandbox?" "Essentially, yes." "And you've been, what? My celestial babysitter, making sure I don't trip over my shoelaces and unravel the universe?" Thara's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. "If that framing helps you comprehend the situation, then yes." Alan let out a short laugh, more out of disbelief than amusement. "Well, that's just great. I can barely keep my car running, and now I'm supposed to be the glue holding reality together. No pressure." Thara's gaze softened, a flicker of something almost empathetic crossing her alien features. "You were never meant to shoulder this burden alone. That's why I'm here." "Well, you're doing a bang-up job so far," Alan said, gesturing toward the wreckage of his shop. "Is this how you usually protect people? By letting their livelihood go up in flames?" "That wasn't my doing," Thara replied, her tone cool. "The Krez-Thari are becoming more aggressive. Tonight's events were meant to destabilize you, to push you toward decisions that would weaken your timeline's integrity. Alan raised an eyebrow. You mean like quitting my job because my shop exploded? Exactly. Great. So now I have to outsmart a bunch of cosmic anarchists and also figure out how to pay my rent. This just keeps getting better. Thera tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made Alan shift uncomfortably. You're handling this better than most humans would. Alan shrugged. When your life's a series of small disasters, you kind of learn to roll with the big ones. Plus, I've got a knack for making terrible jokes when I'm in over my head. Thara's expression softened again, and for a moment, Alan thought he saw the faintest glimmer of amusement in her luminous eyes. A curious coping mechanism, but effective. Glad you approve, Alan muttered. So, what's the plan, oh great cosmic bodyguard? Do we, close the rift? Fight off the Krezthari with alien kung fu or something? Thara's gaze shifted back to the sky. The rift is a symptom, not the cause. The Krezthari operate subtly, manipulating events to create instability. To stop them, we must identify their agents within this timeline and neutralize their influence. Alan frowned. Agents? You mean there are actual alien bad guys running around down here? Not aliens, as you understand them. The Kreztharians adapt to their environment, often masquerading as ordinary beings. They sow discord, amplify chaos, and steal candy bars from vending machines, Alan finished. Figures. Thara gave him a pointed look. This isn't a joke, Alan. Hey, I'm not the one who decided to cast me as the star of this intergalactic drama, he shot back. I'm just trying to keep up. Before Thara could respond, the hum in the air grew louder, the light in the clouds intensifying. Alan felt the ground vibrate beneath his feet, the sensation unsettlingly similar to standing too close to a passing freight train. Thara? Should we maybe be running right now? Thara's expression hardened. Number, stay close to me. Alan opened his mouth to argue, but thought better of it. As much as he hated being dragged into this cosmic mess, he couldn't deny that Thara seemed to know what she was doing. Mostly. A crackling sound filled the air, and Alan turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows near the edge of the parking lot. At first glance, it looked like a man, average height, wearing a rain-soaked trench coat, but there was something off about the way it moved, its limbs jerking in unnatural, almost mechanical motions. What is that? Alan whispered. A Krezthari construct, Thara replied, her tone grim. A physical manifestation designed to interact with this plane. Stay behind me. Alan didn't need to be told twice. As Thara stepped forward, her shimmering outfit seemed to shift, the material rearranging itself into intricate patterns that pulsed with a soft, otherworldly light. The construct paused, its glowing eyes locking onto her. Let me guess, Alan muttered from behind her. This is the part where it says, resistance is futile, right? Thara didn't respond. Instead, she raised her hand, and the air around her seemed to ripple like water. Alan watched, equal parts terrified and fascinated, as the construct lunged toward her, and the battle began. Alan Faulkner had once jokingly declared himself a master of dodging disaster. Whether it was narrowly avoiding a speeding ticket or sweet-talking an angry customer into a 5-star Yelp review, his life had been a series of close calls he'd attributed to luck and charm. Tonight, however, Alan realized he might have grossly underestimated just how close some of those calls had been. The battle, or skirmish, or whatever you called a showdown between an alien guardian and a jerky robot doppelganger, had ended as abruptly as it started. Thara had made short work of the Krezthari construct, dissolving it into a shimmering haze with a flick of her hand and a burst of energy that looked suspiciously like high-tech fireworks. Alan, who had spent most of the confrontation peering from behind an overturned trash can, now sat in the aftermath, trying to process what he'd just witnessed. So, Alan began, brushing bits of gravel off his jacket. "Is this like a regular Tuesday for you?" Thera stood a few feet away, surveying the empty parking lot with her usual air of cool detachment. "Not quite," she said. "They're escalating. Constructs like that are rare. They're expensive for the Krezthari to maintain in this dimension." Alan raised an eyebrow. "Expensive? What? Are they renting them from some intergalactic mercenary agency?" "Not exactly." Thera's lips twitched, but the smile didn't quite materialize. "The energy required to manifest them here is significant. The fact that they used one tonight means they're becoming desperate." "Desperate to kill me," Alan said, leaning back against the trash can. "Great. Just when I thought my life couldn't get any weirder." Thara finally turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "It's not just about you, Alan. Your survival ensures the stability of this timeline. Without you—" Yeah, cosmic linchpin, universal chaos, blah, blah, blah," Alan interrupted, waving a hand. "You've mentioned that part. What I don't get is why me. I mean, look at me. I'm not exactly hero material." Thara tilted her head, studying him with those unnervingly luminous eyes. "Heroism is irrelevant. What matters is your role in the chain of causality." "Right," Alan said, deadpan, "because nothing screams essential to the fabric of the universe like a guy who eats cold pizza for breakfast." Thara ignored his sarcasm and began walking toward what remained of his shop. Alan scrambled to his feet and followed, his curiosity outweighing his lingering fear. As they stepped through the smoldering wreckage, Thara gestured to a twisted piece of metal that had once been part of the vending machine. "Do you remember the bar fight you got into 6 years ago?" Alan blinked at the sudden change in topic. "What does that have to do with anything? Just answer the question." Yeah, I remember. Some guy accused me of cheating at darts. Things got heated." "And do you recall what happened after that?" Alan scratched the back of his neck. "Not really. I mean, I got a pretty nasty black eye, but nothing major." Thara crouched beside the metal, running her fingers along its jagged edge. "That fight wasn't as inconsequential as you think. If you hadn't been injured, you would have left the bar 5 minutes earlier. If you'd left 5 minutes earlier, you would have been struck by a drunk driver who ran a red light." Alan stared at her, his mouth suddenly dry. "Wait, are you saying you—" "I intervened," Thara said simply. "Guided events to keep you alive." Alan felt a chill run down his spine. He'd spent years laughing off his knack for avoiding disaster, never once considering that something, or someone, might have been pulling the strings. "That's insane," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "It's the truth," Thara replied. "Your existence has always been precarious. I've spent lifetimes ensuring you remain where you need to be." Alan ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "Okay, let's say I believe you. Why not just, I don't know, make me immortal or something? Wouldn't that solve the problem?" Thara stood, brushing soot off her shimmering outfit. "Immortality is far more complicated than humans imagine. It would destabilize the timeline even further." "Of course it would," Alan muttered, "because nothing about my life can ever be simple." Thara didn't respond, instead turning her attention to the faint glow still emanating from the clouds above. "We need to move," she said. "The rift is closing, but the Krezthari will strike again soon." "Great," Alan said, throwing up his hands. "Where are we going? The secret alien bunker? A flying saucer? Please tell me there's snacks involved." Thara shot him a look that was equal parts amusement and exasperation. "You'll see." They left the ruins of the shop behind, Alan trailing after Thara as she led him through the rain-soaked streets. As they walked, Alan found himself stealing glances at her, his mind churning with questions he wasn't sure he wanted answers to. "So," he said after a while, "if you've been watching over me for, what, lifetimes? Does that mean you know everything about me?" "Within reason," Thara replied. "Your habits, your decisions, the factors that influence your path." "Yes, Okay, Alan said, trying to suppress a grin. What's my favorite color? Blue. Lucky guess. Favorite food? Spaghetti bolognese. You add extra garlic. Alan stopped in his tracks. Wait, seriously? How do you— I told you, Thara said, not breaking stride. I've been watching you for a long time. Alan jogged to catch up, his grin widening despite himself. All right, Miss Omniscient. What's the one thing I've always wanted to do but never had the guts to try? Thara paused, her expression softening. Learn to play the piano. Alan's grin faltered. Oh. They walked in silence for a moment, the rain pattering softly around them. Alan felt a strange mix of awe and unease settling in his chest. As much as he hated to admit it, there was something oddly comforting about Thara's presence, like a safety net he hadn't known he needed. So, he said finally, breaking the silence. What happens if we win? If we stop these Krez whatever they're called? Thara glanced at him, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Then you continue your life, and I return to the background. Alan frowned. That's it? You just disappear? Not disappear, Thara said. I'll still be here, ensuring the timeline remains intact, but you won't see me. Alan didn't know why that thought bothered him, but it did. Shaking it off, he forced a grin and said, Well, if nothing else, I hope the next vending machine doesn't try to kill me. Thara almost smiled. I'll see what I can do. Alan Faulkner had experienced some wild nights before. There was the time he'd accidentally entered a bachelor party that involved a mechanical bull and glow-in-the-dark body paint, or the infamous punch bowl incident that no one in his college dorm dared speak of again. But nothing could compare to this, trudging through a rain-soaked alley with an alien woman who had apparently been saving his life since before he could grow a decent mustache. So, Alan began, his sneakers squelching in the puddles, what's the next step in your intergalactic babysitting plan? Please tell me it involves coffee and maybe a pastry. Thara shot him a sideways glance, her glowing eyes betraying just the faintest hint of exasperation. We're not stopping for snacks, Alan. Okay, but hear me out. If the universe hinges on me staying alive, shouldn't we, make sure I'm well fed? I'm just saying, it's hard to save a timeline on an empty stomach. Your nutritional status is not a concern at the moment. Clearly, you've never been hangry, Alan muttered. Thara ignored him, her attention focused on the device in her hand, a sleek silver rectangle that pulsed with a soft blue light. Alan had tried asking about it earlier, but the explanation had gone straight over his head. Something about quantum resonance and temporal nodes, which sounded more like a prog rock album than a useful tool. All right, Alan said after a beat. If we're not stopping for coffee, where are we going? To a safe house, Thara replied without looking up. Somewhere the Krez-Thari can't track us. Alan raised an eyebrow. You have a safe house? What are you, an interdimensional spy? In a manner of speaking. Do you have a secret code name? Wait, let me guess. Something cool and mysterious, like Shadow Falcon or Cosmic Whisper. Thara is my code name. Alan blinked. Wait, really? What's your real name then? Thara hesitated, the briefest flicker of discomfort crossing her face. It's unpronounceable in your language. Alan grinned. Oh, come on. Try me. I'll bet I can get close. You won't. Is it like 50 syllables long? Or does it have one of those clicks in it? Because I've been practicing that ever since I saw a documentary on— It's not important, Thara cut in, her tone firm. Focus on what matters. Alan held up his hands in mock surrender. All right. No need to go all serious on me. But for the record, I'm calling you Shadow Falcon from now on. Thara's sigh was almost imperceptible, but Alan caught it, and he couldn't help but smirk. They arrived at the safe house an hour later, a dilapidated warehouse on the edge of town that looked about as safe as a haunted amusement park. Alan stared at the rusting metal doors and broken windows, wondering if Thara had accidentally set the GPS to serial killer lair. This is it? He asked. Are we hiding from aliens or squatting in an abandoned rave venue? Appearances can be deceiving, Thara said as she approached the door. She placed her hand on the corroded surface, and a faint hum filled the air. A moment later, the metal shimmered, its rust dissolving into nothingness, as the door slid open to reveal a brightly lit interior that looked like the set of a sci-fi movie. Okay, that's mildly impressive, Alan admitted, as he followed her inside. The space was surprisingly clean, with walls lined by sleek, glowing panels and an array of equipment that Alan couldn't even begin to identify. There was a strange, almost calming hum in the air, like the sound of a distant power generator. So, Alan said, spinning in a slow circle, do all alien safe houses come with mood lighting, or is this a special feature? Thara ignored the comment, walking over to one of the panels and pressing a series of buttons. A holographic screen flickered to life, displaying what looked like a map of the city overlaid with glowing blue dots. Alan squinted at the screen. What's that? Energy signatures, Thara said. These represent disturbances caused by Krezthari activity. Alan leaned closer, frowning. There are a lot of dots. Yes, Thara said grimly. Their influence is spreading. They're manipulating events to destabilize this timeline. Alan let out a low whistle. So what? They're causing traffic accidents and stock market crashes? Seems like a weird hobby. It's more insidious than that, Thara replied. They target key individuals, disrupt critical moments. Every small change ripples outward, creating chaos. Alan scratched his head. And let me guess, my existence somehow counters all of that? Precisely. Well, Alan said, plopping onto a nearby chair, it's nice to know I'm important for something, even if it's just being the universe's human paperweight. Thara gave him a look that was almost, but not quite, amused. You underestimate your role, Alan. Yeah. Cosmic linchpin, universal stability. I got it. He gestured toward the screen. So how do we stop them? I assume you've got a plan? Thara hesitated, her gaze flicking back to the map. We need to identify their agents. The Krezthari don't act directly. They manipulate through proxies, individuals they've altered or influenced. Alan frowned. Like that creepy robot thing from earlier? Exactly. But most of their agents are subtler. They could be anyone. A politician, a scientist, even an ordinary citizen. Great, Alan said, leaning back in the chair. So we're looking for a needle in a haystack full of evil interdimensional needles. Thara didn't respond. Her attention focused on the screen. Alan watched her for a moment, then said, You know, you could have picked someone a little more qualified for this job, like a secret agent or a genius inventor, not a guy whose biggest accomplishment is beating Pac-Man. Thara's expression softened slightly. You're more capable than you realize, Alan. Yeah, well, tell that to my high school physics teacher, he muttered. She once told me I had the scientific curiosity of a potato. Thara almost smiled, and for a brief moment, the tension in the room seemed to lift. But then the screen emitted a sharp beep, and her expression turned serious again. What is it? Alan asked, sitting up. Thara pointed to a glowing red dot on the map. Another disturbance, close by. Alan sighed. Let me guess. We're going to check it out, aren't we? Yes. Fantastic, he said, standing up. Because nothing says fun night like chasing after interdimensional chaos agents. Thara ignored his sarcasm, already heading for the door. Alan followed, muttering under his breath, I really should have just stayed home and ordered pizza. Alan Faulkner had always been skeptical about the phrase, a quiet night in. Whenever someone uttered those cursed words, chaos inevitably followed. And yet, as he trudged alongside Thara toward the source of the red dot, glowing ominously on her holographic map, he realized he would have given anything for an uneventful evening. Let me guess, Alan said, breaking the silence. The glowing red dot means something bad. It's a significant energy disturbance, Thara replied, her tone clipped. Likely Krezithari activity. Significant energy disturbance, Alan repeated. Sounds like my uncle after Thanksgiving dinner. Thera glanced at him, her lips twitching in what might have been the ghost of a smile. This is serious, Alan. I know, he said, holding up his hands. I'm just saying, you could work on your terminology. Maybe call it something less terrifying, like spatial hiccup. Would that help you take it seriously? Not at all, Alan admitted, grinning. But it would definitely make me less likely to bolt in the opposite direction. Thera sighed, her glowing eyes fixed ahead. Focus, Alan. We're almost there. They were heading toward an industrial district on the outskirts of town, a maze of warehouses and shipping containers that loomed like silent sentinels in the darkness. The red dot on Thara's map pulsed faster as they approached, its ominous glow casting faint reflections on her face. So, Alan said, his voice a little too loud in the eerie stillness. What are we expecting here? Another killer vending machine, maybe a possessed forklift? Ooh, how about an evil Roomba? Thera stopped walking, turning to face him. Alan. Yeah? Please try to stay behind me this time. Hey, I was totally behind you last time. You were hiding behind a trash can. Exactly, Alan said. Strategic positioning. Trash cans are nature's shields. Thera gave him a long, unimpressed look before continuing toward one of the warehouses. Alan followed, his nervous chatter filling the silence. The warehouse looked abandoned, its windows were broken, and the paint on its walls was peeling like sunburned skin. Thera paused at the entrance, holding up her hand. Alan squinted, trying to see what she was looking at, but all he saw was a rusty metal door. Something's wrong, Thera said. Define wrong, Alan whispered. Energy signatures are fluctuating. It's unstable. Great, Alan muttered. Unstable is exactly what I want in a situation involving mysterious alien activity. Thara ignored him, pressing her hand against the door. The metal glowed faintly under her touch, before sliding open with a low groan. Alan hesitated, peering into the dimly lit interior. After you, he said, gesturing with a mock bow. Thera didn't wait for an invitation, stepping inside with her usual calm determination. Alan followed, his sneakers squeaking on the concrete floor. The air inside was thick and metallic, carrying a faint hum that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. Okay, Alan said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. This is officially the creepiest place I've ever been. Thara didn't respond. She was staring at the center of the room, where a strange glowing sphere hovered a few feet off the ground. It pulsed with a soft red light, its surface rippling like liquid fire. What is that? Alan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. A temporal distortion, Thera said. It's a gateway. The Krezithari must have created it to bring something or someone through. Alan took a cautious step closer, squinting at the sphere. Okay, but why does it look like the evil cousin of a lava lamp? Before Thera could answer, the sphere pulsed violently, sending a shockwave through the room. Alan staggered backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. Whoa, what was that? The gateway is destabilizing, Thera said, her voice sharp. Something's coming through. Alan's stomach dropped. Coming through? Like what? A space monster? An alien assassin? Oh God, it's a giant killer Roomba, isn't it? Thera didn't have time to answer. The sphere flared bright red, and a figure began to materialize within its glowing depths. Alan froze, his mind racing through every bad decision he'd ever made that might have led him to this moment. When the figure finally stepped out of the sphere, Alan's first thought was that it looked surprisingly human, tall and thin, with sharp features and piercing eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. But there was something off. Its movements were too smooth, its expression too calm. Is that one of them? Alan whispered. Thera nodded, her stance shifting subtly. A Krezithari proxy. Be ready. Ready for what? I don't even have a weapon. Before Thera could respond, the proxy spoke, its voice cold and mechanical. "Alan Faulkner," it said, its glowing eyes locking onto him. "You are an anomaly. You must be removed." Alan's mouth went dry. "Yeah, well, you're not the first person to think that." The proxy didn't react to his attempt at humor. It raised its hand, and a crackling energy field began to form around it. "Get down!" Thara shouted, shoving Alan to the ground just as a bolt of energy shot past them, scorching the wall behind them. "Okay," Alan said, his voice muffled against the concrete. "This is officially worse than the vending machine." Thara was already moving, her hand glowing as she fired a burst of energy at the proxy. The blast hit it square in the chest, but the proxy barely flinched. "Great," Alan muttered. "It's bulletproof." "It's shielded," Thara said, dodging another energy bolt. "Stay down." Alan didn't need to be told twice. He crawled toward a stack of crates, ducking behind them as Thara continued to trade blasts with the proxy. The air crackled with energy, and the floor vibrated beneath him. "This is fine," Alan said to himself, his voice shaky. "Everything's fine. I'm just hiding behind some crates while my alien guardian fights a killer robot. Totally normal Tuesday." Despite the danger, he couldn't help but peek over the edge of the crates. Thara was a blur of motion, her attacks precise and unrelenting. But the proxy was relentless, its glowing eyes fixed on her with unnerving intensity. "Come on, Thara," Alan muttered. "You've got this." As if she'd heard him, Thara launched a final, powerful blast that shattered the proxy's shield. The creature staggered, its glowing eyes flickering. "Alan!" Thara shouted. "Now!" "Now what?" Alan yelled back. "Throw something!" Alan looked around, his eyes landing on a heavy metal pipe lying nearby. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me!" "Do it!" Thara shouted. Muttering a string of curses, Alan grabbed the pipe and hurled it with all his strength. To his astonishment, it struck the proxy square in the head, sending it toppling backward into the glowing sphere. The gateway flared violently, then collapsed in on itself, taking the proxy with it. For a moment, there was silence. Then Alan sat back, panting. "I can't believe that worked." Thara approached him, offering a hand to help him up. "You did well." "Yeah, well," Alan said, brushing himself off. "Next time, let's stick to coffee and pastries." Alan Faulkner had always believed he was a simple guy, someone who was content with a mid-level desk job, subpar microwave dinners, and the occasional weekend binge of vintage sci-fi shows. Yet here he was, hurtling through the cosmos in what he could only describe as an alien version of an Uber, accompanied by a glowing-eyed woman who might as well have been the CEO of intergalactic intrigue. "Are you sure this thing is safe?" Alan asked, gripping the edge of his seat. The transport pod, as Thara called it, was sleek, metallic, and unsettlingly silent. It floated as if gravity had been politely asked to take a break. "Perfectly safe," Thara replied, her focus on the holographic console in front of her. Her hands moved with practiced ease, adjusting what Alan assumed were navigation settings. Alan wasn't convinced. Right. Perfectly safe, like the vending machine, the killer robot, and that glowing red death bubble back there. Those were different circumstances, Thara said, her tone as calm as ever. "Sure they were," Alan muttered. He leaned back in his seat, though not without casting a wary glance at the pod's walls, half expecting them to sprout tentacles. "So," he said after a moment, "where exactly are we going? Because if this is your version of Disneyland, I'm going to need a map and some churros." Thara tapped a glowing symbol on the console, and a holographic map of the solar system sprang to life. Alan blinked. "Wait, is that Earth? And is that Mars? Are we going to Mars? Please tell me we're going to Mars." Thara gave him a sidelong glance. "We're going beyond Mars. Far beyond." Alan's enthusiasm faltered. "Define far beyond. Are we talking Jupiter far? Or are we about to break out of the solar system and meet something that makes the Krezthari look like chihuahuas?" Thara's silence was not reassuring. The journey was surreal. Stars streaked past them like glowing threads, and Alan couldn't help but press his face against the transparent panel that served as a window. "Wow," he whispered. "This is actually kind of beautiful." Thara didn't respond, but there was a faint softening of her features as she watched him. "You know," Alan said, pulling back from the window, "if you'd told me yesterday I'd be zooming through space like some kind of galactic hitchhiker, I would have laughed, and probably suggested you get your head checked." "I've been protecting you for years, Alan," Thara said, her voice quieter than usual. "Yeah, about that," Alan said, turning to face her. "You keep saying you've saved me countless times, but you haven't exactly explained why. I mean, I get that I'm some kind of cosmic linchpin or whatever, but what makes me so special? Is it my charm, my razor-sharp wit?" Thara actually smiled at that, a small, fleeting expression that Alan almost missed. "It's not about charm or wit, it's about probability." "Probability?" Alan echoed. Thara nodded. "The universe is a delicate balance of probabilities. Every decision, every action, creates ripples that can alter the course of history. Most people's actions are like pebbles in a pond, small ripples that fade quickly. But you, Alan, your actions are like boulders. The ripples you create can change the entire flow of the river." Alan blinked. "Okay, but why me?" "I'm not exactly a mover and shaker. I mean, my biggest accomplishment last week was remembering to buy milk before it expired." "It's not about what you do now," Thara said. "It's about what you're meant to do. Your future is pivotal." Alan frowned. "Pivotal how? Am I supposed to invent time travel, stop an alien invasion, write a best-selling self-help book?" Thara hesitated, and Alan's stomach sank. "You don't know, do you?" he asked. "I know enough," Thara said. "That's not reassuring," Alan muttered. Their destination turned out to be a massive structure orbiting a blue-green gas giant. It looked like a cross between a cathedral and a spaceship, with spires that seemed to hum with energy and glowing symbols etched into its surface. "Welcome to the archive," Thara said as the pod docked. "The archive," Alan repeated. "Sounds fancy. Is there a gift shop?" Thara ignored him, stepping out of the pod. Alan followed, his sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. The air inside the archive was cool and faintly metallic, with an underlying hum that Alan could feel in his bones. "What is this place?" he asked, glancing around. "A repository of knowledge," Thara said. "It contains records of every significant event in this sector of the galaxy." Alan whistled. "Sounds like a lot of data. Do they have a Wi-Fi password?" Thara gave him a pointed look, and he held up his hands. Okay, I'll be serious." As they walked deeper into the archive, Alan noticed figures moving through the halls, tall, slender beings with translucent skin that shimmered like mother of pearl. They glanced at him curiously, but didn't stop. "Friends of yours?" Alan asked. "Archivists," Thara said. "They maintain the records and ensure the knowledge is preserved." Alan nodded, though he couldn't help but feel like he was in a high-tech library where he'd forgotten to return a book. Eventually, Thara led him to a chamber filled with glowing orbs suspended in midair. Each orb pulsed with a soft light, and Alan could see faint images swirling within them. "These are temporal records," Thara explained, "fragments of the timeline." "Cool," Alan said, peering at one of the orbs. "So this is like a cosmic DVR?" Thara sighed. "If that helps you understand?" "Yes." Alan reached out to touch one of the orbs, but Thara grabbed his wrist. "Do not touch them," she said firmly. "Got it," Alan said, pulling his hand back. "No touching the glowy things." Thara moved to one of the orbs, her expression serious. "This record might help us understand the Krezthari's next move." Alan watched as she activated the orb, its light intensifying. An image appeared, showing a planet engulfed in flames. Alan's stomach tightened. "That's Earth," he said. Thara nodded. "If the Krezthari succeed, this is the future they will create," Alan stared at the image, his usual humor failing him. "Okay," he said after a moment. "What do we do to stop it?" Thara turned to him, her glowing eyes filled with determination. "We find the keystone event, the moment where everything hinges, and we stop them from altering it." "Right," Alan said, squaring his shoulders. No pressure or anything. For once, Thara allowed herself a small smile. "You'll do fine, Alan. You've already done more than you realize." "Yeah," Alan said, forcing a grin. "Let's just hope the next cosmic ripple involves something less terrifying than a killer robot, like, I don't know, an evil toaster." Thara chuckled softly, and for a brief moment, the weight of the universe didn't feel quite so heavy. Alan Faulkner had faced a lot of bizarre situations lately. Killer vending machines, glowing alien death spheres, and a towering alien proxy with the personality of a disapproving substitute teacher were just the highlights. But as he stood in the heart of the archive, staring at the swirling, glowing timeline in front of him, he realized he had officially entered the endgame phase of this madness. Thara adjusted the settings on the holographic console in front of her, her glowing eyes focused. "The keystone event is approaching," she said. "Great," Alan said, pacing behind her. "Let's hope it doesn't involve another cosmic Roomba. I'm not sure my nerves can handle it." Thara turned to him, her expression both amused and serious. "This isn't a joke, Alan. The keystone event will determine whether the Krezthari succeed in altering Earth's future, or if we stop them." I know, Alan said, running a hand through his hair. "No pressure or anything. Just the fate of the world hanging on whether or not I can keep it together." "You've come farther than you realize," Thara said softly. Alan paused, meeting her gaze. For a moment, her words settled something inside him, a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. "Yeah," he said, forcing a smile. "Let's hope that counts for something." The keystone event turned out to be a seemingly innocuous moment, a sunny afternoon at a bustling cafe in the city center. Alan squinted as the scene unfolded around him. "Wait, this is my favorite coffee shop. What's so special about this place?" Thara's expression remained neutral, though there was a flicker of something, hesitation, in her eyes. "It's not the location, it's what's about to happen here." Alan watched as his past self appeared, walking toward the cafe with his usual distracted energy. "Oh no," he groaned. "Please don't tell me I'm the keystone event. I don't even remember this day." Thara didn't answer. Instead, she gestured toward the street corner, where a man in a trench coat was fiddling with a strange device. The device pulsed faintly, its glow eerily similar to the Krezthari technology Alan had encountered before. "Who's that?" Alan asked. "A Krezthari operative," Thara said. "That device is designed to trigger a cascade of events, small, seemingly insignificant ripples that will culminate in Earth's collapse decades from now." Alan frowned. "Okay, so we stop him, right?" "Easy peasy." "It's not that simple," Thara said. "If we disrupt this event incorrectly, the timeline could fracture." Alan threw up his hands. "Of course it's not simple. Why would saving the world ever be simple?" They moved quickly, but carefully, weaving through the bustling crowd as they approached the operative. Alan couldn't help but feel a surreal sense of déjà vu as he caught glimpses of his past self ordering coffee and awkwardly chatting with the barista. "Wow," he said, cringing. "Was I always this awkward?" "You've improved," Thara said, her tone almost teasing. Alan raised an eyebrow. "Was that a compliment? From you?" Thara didn't answer, but the corner of her mouth twitched ever so slightly. As they neared the operative, Thara handed Alan a small device, a sleek metallic object with glowing blue accents. "Use this to disrupt his equipment," she said. Alan stared at the device. "And how exactly does this work? Is there a manual? A tutorial video?" "It's intuitive," Thara said. "Right," Alan muttered. "Because intuitive is how I describe alien technology." He took a deep breath, clutching the device tightly as they closed the final gap. The operative hadn't noticed them yet, his focus entirely on the glowing contraption in his hands. "Okay," Alan whispered. "Here goes nothing." He stepped forward, raising the device, and promptly tripped over a loose brick in the pavement. "Ow!" Alan yelped, crashing to the ground. The device clattered out of his hand, skidding across the pavement and stopping at the operative's feet. The operative looked up, his glowing eyes narrowing. Hi," Alan said, scrambling to his feet. "Lovely day, isn't it?" The operative raised his hand, a crackling energy field forming around it. "Alan!" Thera shouted, launching herself into action. She tackled the operative, sending both of them crashing into a nearby table. "Great," Alan muttered, grabbing the device. "Guess it's up to me now." He darted forward, activating the device with a flick of his thumb. The glowing contraption in the operative's hands sparked violently, emitting a high-pitched whine before imploding in a flash of light. The operative let out a guttural snarl, his form flickering before he vanished entirely. The cafe was in chaos, tables overturned, coffee cups shattered, but the timeline appeared intact. Alan's past self walked away, blissfully unaware of the drama that had just unfolded mere feet from him. "Well," Alan said, panting, "that was intense." Thera approached him, her expression unreadable. "You did it." "We did it," Alan corrected, offering her a tired smile. Thera hesitated, then nodded. Back in the archive, Alan leaned against a console, still processing everything that had happened. "So," he said, "is this the part where you tell me the future is safe and I get a gold star?" "The timeline is stabilized," Thara said. "For now?" Alan groaned. "For now? Come on, can't we get at least a decade off before the next crisis?" Thera's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "You've grown, Alan. More than you realize." "Yeah, well," Alan said, shrugging. "When you've faced killer robots and cosmic Roombas, you either grow or lose your mind." Thera didn't reply, but there was a warmth in her glowing eyes that Alan hadn't seen before. As Alan stepped back into the transport pod, he glanced at Thera. "So, what happens now?" "Now, you return to your life," she said. "My life," Alan echoed. "You mean the life where I pretend none of this ever happened?" "Not pretend," Thera said, "but live. And remember, your actions, no matter how small, have meaning." Alan nodded slowly. "Right. No pressure or anything." As the pod began to hum with energy, Alan couldn't help but grin. "Hey, Thera?" "Yes?" "If you ever need help saving the universe again, you know where to find me." Thara's smile was small but genuine. "I'll keep that in mind." And with that, Alan Faulkner hurtled back toward Earth, a little wiser, a little braver, and a lot more aware of the ripples he could create in the cosmos.